Good morning. It is Monday, 11 a.m. Pacific time, which is not Eastern, by the way. We haven't started yet. Some people are asking, is it over? I'm like, it hasn't even begun yet. So, yeah, here we are, 11 o'clock Pacific time, the only time that really matters on a non-flat Earth. Good morning. I have my caffeine, which is I'm on my, I don't know, what, fourth cup now already, Chesh?
Something like that, yeah. I wasn't totally
Something along those
counting,
lines.
but
I've
yeah,
been drinking quite a bit this morning,
it's 2
caffeine.
p.m. Eastern, by the way.
You what?
I said it's 2 p.m. Eastern, by the way.
Oh, yes.
Steve,
it's afternoon for you.
Steve is so narcissistic and only cares about himself so much that he does not even know what the time difference is.
Nor do
and
I
he
care.
works with me.
Yeah, nor do I care.
See?
Hey, for non sequiturs, all Eastern time. So, on this show we could do Pacific.
To be fair,
on the next one we'll
do
Central. Yeah, they'll do Mountain. It's just, I don't really care, to be honest with you. People could do Eastern. It makes no difference to me. I just won't do UDT. Don't ask me to do UDT. Nobody wants UDT.
It's gonna have to be Eastern because me and Bull outnumber you.
Yeah, no, I don't. Whatever. We started at 2 Eastern. Actually, we started 2 minutes before. We were actually early today. Did you notice?
Yes, we were early.
The conversion is so easy between these two that I just have it memorized at this point. So when Steve tells me a time, I sometimes, if I'm not sure, I just confirm that he's talking about his time, and I just know what it is my time.
So adding three, is probably not that difficult. It's more difficult. I swear, I am for example, I know people that could not figure out military time if their life depended on it. To them, it was so confusing to add 12 or not to add 12 that they just could not figure out military time.
Arizona is difficult because Arizona doesn't do the
Arizona doesn't have daylight. Right. It makes sense in the winter. It makes no sense in summer.
Yeah.
Well, it just means that I don't know necessarily what I'm dealing with when I'm dealing with Arizona, but realistically, I think we should all just adopt that and stop. Even if we just take a half an hour, move everything a half an hour, and leave it there now.
Split the difference. Like it. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll figure it out.
Canada, we've got one province. We've got one province that's in its own time zone because it's got a half an hour change on it.
I'm just telling you, if we had a flat Earth, we wouldn't have to worry about these things. So maybe we should all go flat. Just saying. It's a viable option just for convenience, right? Utility. We'll just make it flat. And
going flat would be expensive. I don't.
Heather wants to know if we're tweaked out on caffeine. Oh, girl, you don't even know. You don't know the struggle this morning. I've been sleeping for this entire weekend. I did not even get on Twitter that much. People have been actually asking, what's Steve's Twitter? I'm like, I don't know what the hell's going on. Matter of fact, what we're going to be talking about today happened literally when I wasn't even paying attention to any of this. This was mostly with Cheshire and some doctor of mathematics and some other stuff, and I'm kind of catching the tail end of it. Yeah, I stopped talking about that Friday. No, there's a lot of people that have been going after him, and it kind of was the catalyst for this particular episode dealing with science and philosophy. Even though I'm just kind of reading, what happened over the weekend, and I'm like, wow, this is some pretty messed up stuff. Scientism. It kind of actually is kind of stupid.
It's a silly argument. It's a silly discussion, but it does demonstrate that there's a lot of people who just do not know how philosophy applies to different sciences or how it applies to their regular day-to-day life. It's just how a lot of people don't realize the amount of science that goes into their phone or their computer and how communications function. So anytime you're talking to a flat earther, for example, they're talking to you on the internet. How does the internet work? Because it takes the curvature of the Earth into consideration when it functions. It has to.
They don't believe any of that stuff, though. Yeah, they don't even understand GPS. They don't understand relativity. Right. They don't understand compensations for these things. They just don't believe it. Right?
Science. Right, but they're using a science and they're utilizing it with no problem, with having absolutely zero understanding about how it actually how it actually works, functions, and where it comes from. And so it's the same kind of thing that we were talking about with philosophy, right?
I think it kind of comes from the fact that computers went from hobbyist machines, like the old Apple IIs, etc., were hobby machines. You buy it for a family, maybe. But it wasn't just, it was an expensive purchase. You had to learn how to use the thing. Now it's like buying a bookcase stereo to buy a computer, right? If it you plug it in and it works and it does what you need it to do, and it's pretty simple to use for the most part.
Same with a microwave. Godless Scummer for 5 says, going flat means you have to wear a duck onesie instead of a hazmat suit. That's science. I don't have a duck onesie.
I thought it was a chicken. Was that Nathan Thompson reference?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, something along those
Golden
lines.
Unicorn for 2 said, thank you guys for this stream. Kiss.
Thank you, Manya. It's not just, but it's not
don't
just.
understand how a microwave functions.
I do. He has a magnetron tube, and an electron circles around it, produces microwave energy, and that gets absorbed by the water molecules and heats up. And yeah, it's not that real hard science.
It shakes around really quick.
Magnetron tube for the win. But it's not just those fields that, like you were talking about, like with gravity or computers. I mean, biology, right? People will deny evolutionary theory, even though they recognize that medicine works, right? I mean, there's a whole field of medicine based around the fact that evolution is a real thing.
Yeah, they're utilizing the thing that they're complaining about, and so they're utilizing the technology that they're claiming is not effective. So, and that's kind of what we're getting into with philosophy. It's the same reason, like it's the same thing that I kind of upset Jackson Wheat like a month or two ago when I had him on my channel talking about that there are people who deny extinction. And it's like, what?
There's a lot of things that go extinct all the time. I mean, we're fortunate we're extant right now, but we're going to eventually be an extinct species. It's just a matter of time. Mammals only have a certain amount of lifetime. Mammals mammals go extinct. We're a mammal. We're going to die out. It's going to happen. Just a matter of. I should say that if we don't die out, we'll evolve to some other form of human, right? Homo sapiens sapien, and then whatever Homo sapiens sapien, whatever. And by that time, we're probably going to live on other planets, hopefully. And who knows what will happen then?
There's probably
if we get
going to be enough
genetic.
There'll be enough physical alterations between multiple planets and there'll probably be speciation within humans. So there'll be humans that are still existing over here and humans that are existing over here that are no longer considered the same type of human.
Yeah,
they can no longer interbreed.
They'll be reproductively isolated from each other, which again, Homo sapiens sapiens
gravity's going to
the most modern.
Mess us up. Living on a planet with different gravity is going to change our.
I don't see how we're going to survive that. I don't.
So much.
How are we going to survive on another planet when we don't have the same microbe and flora and fauna? I mean, we're acclimated to this particular Earth, right? We're this particular world that has a certain amount of microbial. We're like what 40, 50, whatever percent microbial makeup. Without that, we cannot exist. It's a complete symbiotic type relationship. And so if we go to another planet, how are we going to make up for that? To me, it seems an insurmountable obstacle to habitate on an entirely different biodome.
There is also like biotech. So like genetic, like besides just genetic alteration, but like technological alteration. So that way we're not even just only humans anymore. We also have technology just built.
And that might be,
us.
I think it would be a combination of technology, terraforming, adaptation to new types of biodiversity. It's going to be a very long process, though. But hey, you know what? The whole process of that is actually a philosophical concept of what makes a human, what makes us people, what makes us individual. So science versus philosophy. The science only can do so much. Science tells us how to explain things, but philosophy is the guiding force. And this was so interesting on the.
Right. Science might tell you that it is possible for you to create a nanomachine. Philosophy is going to tell you what you should do with it and if it's okay to put it in a human body.
Yeah, or like cloning, right? Science, we know we can clone people, but is it ethical too? I mean, they did studies where they took triplets and they separated them on purpose to go, live in different environments to do studies on them. Was it an ethical study? Of course not. I mean, completely unethical. But science didn't care. Science doesn't give a shit about what is ethical or not, to be honest with you. Science is objective, right? It doesn't even care what is ethical. What is ethical is bioethics, which is a philosophy of science. Science itself doesn't tell you what's ethical or not.
So fast, it'll make your head spin.
If I have the option human 2.0?
I want bionic eyeballs. I want bionic legs. I just want to have like legs that I can press a button and it'll just go in the direction that I want, so I'll never get tired.
Yeah, you could pretty much replace a vast majority of your body parts. I mean, we have, artificial hearts, artificial lungs, you could probably make a spleen, pancreas. I mean, eventually liver. I mean, all these things are probably going to be something that is replaceable one of these
we're
days.
at the point where
limbs.
we're 3D printing a clone. Like, you can do that. You can clone your liver and basically reprint it and replace it in your body, so there is a 0% chance that you'll reject it. Now, it's not in huge amount of use yet, but that's only a matter of time, right? Where it's just like, oh, you have cancer in this part of your body and it's going to kill you. We're just going to take that whole part out and put a new part in. Here you go.
Modular.
But what happens? And here's where you start getting to philosophy. What happens when you start doing that to parts of your brain?
Well, it also goes with the ship of Theseus, if you remember that. Ship of Theseus was, if you have a ship and you start replacing items of that ship, a part here and a part there, and eventually as you have a whole new ship, is it the original ship to begin with? That's a philosophical question. And humans, hey, we get replaced all the time. I mean, cells are replaced, every 7 years? We're kind of, so now I don't know how much of that is actually truism. That's the idiom that's out there now. I think that a lot of the brain matter is still original, but I mean, for the most part, we get replaced, and are we the same person? Matter of fact, people have actually hypothesized that when you sleep and you wake up, you're kind of an entirely different person.
Sometimes, and sometimes people that will change for people. People will change on a dime just because something in their brain chemistry has changed because of either some kind of internal or external force. Are you the same person before puberty as you are after puberty?
Hormones have a big effect. Or if you have a brain tumor, are you the same person?
Brain tumors?
But again, these are philosophical questions, and this is why when you guys were discussing this on Twitter, a lot of people were losing their shit, and as well as they should. I mean, this is one of those rare instances where I actually had a lot of people agreeing with me for a change when they were going after somebody who has a PhD in mathematics but didn't really. I didn't think was being a very honest interlocutor. They might be a savant in magnetohydrodynamics. I'm sure that they are, and that's a very difficult topic to say the least. That's not an easy topic for even physicists. So somebody who's really a mastery of the mathematics of that is incredible. If you ever look at Stokes equations, they're nasty. But that doesn't mean that you're good at the other thing.
Right. Being proficient in one thing does not mean you're equally as proficient in other things. And that doesn't make you any less or better of a person. And it's the same with not being good at things or being good at things. That goes every way. Just because you're good at something or bad at something does not make you better or worse in another field necessarily. However, how much better could you be at in your field if you start incorporating a broader, like a wider horizon? So like in some things this is a little bit more obvious than others. When we make changes in technology because we've watched what a spider does, it's like, oh wow, this spider has this incredibly strong structural webbing that it uses. What if we copy that into something else? Well, congratulations, you've taken biology and put it into engineering.
So how much biology too?
Right, and how much better are we for it when you can look at things on a much wider scale and start incorporating it into whatever specific thing you're doing. So if I'm painting, especially if you're going to pull an art, if I'm painting and I want to paint let's say I want to paint a cloudy sky, and I need to pick what time of day it is. Maybe I don't pick what time of day it is. Maybe I take what I'm looking at. I take a picture of something I'm looking at, or I take a picture of the ocean, and I take the colors out of the ocean and paint a sky out of those colors. Right? Like now I've taken water and put it into the sky without making it rain. Right?
Well, let me ask you this: when you're doing art, I mean, the ability to do art is one thing, right? I mean, you paint a picture, but the philosophy of art, what is constitutive of Impressionism, Cubism, Surrealism, Realism? These are all.
What is art?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually there's a whole field of that. It's called axiology, which is when you deals with aesthetics, right? Aesthetics is part of axiology, which is philosophy.
Did you know that if you paint a picture of a woman who has really big boobs and a really big badonkadonk and a very, very thin waist, it can't be art because she has nowhere to put her organs?
It would be. Is it anime? Yeah, I remember that being something on Twitter. People were like, "This is not realistic because she has no organs there." Blah blah blah. And I'm like, "This is. I don't understand how art's supposed to be realistic." Matter of fact, there's whole fields of art that are completely distorted realities, like surrealism. I love Dali. Salvador Dali is the greatest artist ever was, but
there are some that are some people put more value in things that look more realistic because they think it's more difficult. They think it's more impressive.
Disagree.
But that's so subjective, right? My unfinished journey for 5 says, glad to hop on to this before going to work.
Thank you, my finished journey. Glad you're coming back around, man. But yeah, no, I think you're exactly right on that. I think that it is very subjective. Art is subjective. Do I think there is objective beauty? I think that's probably possible. I'm not against subjective beauty, but when it comes to evaluation of what, art, yeah, I mean, I think it's much more difficult to do some of the things that Dali has ever done or, Escher has done. If you look at Escher's work compared to somebody who paints something who's photorealistic or something. Yeah, both are difficult. But there's a different degree of mastery involved, and is what you prefer, right? I prefer the non-realistic ones. I think those are just, a pure genius because you have to be creative to come up with all this stuff. I mean, the elephant of the pomegranate dream kind of thing. Come on, to paint something realistic, you don't have to be very creative. You just have to know how to do art, and copy what you.
One of my favorite things to look at, and I really wish I was good at creating it. I'm not yet. Maybe one day I will be, but it's realistic surrealism. So it's like, oh, I'm painting a train and there's people sitting on the train, but the train is underwater, or is it? Right? It's like there's fish swimming by, but are the fish the real thing, or is the train the real thing? What is going on? Anyway, I love stuff like that. Also, landscape art that is like nature versus technology. So I absolutely love taking nature and putting it into technology and taking technology and putting it into nature. I love looking at stuff like that. Do I get to create it? No, it's not really what I do, but oh my god, do I love looking at it. It's so cool. It's so cool.
Yeah, no, I like all forms of art as far as like looking at the ability of people to replicate things or do their own take on it. I mean, I used to have, my dad was an artist of sorts. I mean, he did a lot of drawings, things like that nature. So he did have some paintings around, not real ones, obviously, but prints of Monet. We had Dali. We had Starry Night by just Starry Night.
Painting is underrated, by the way.
Van Gogh. I couldn't think of Van Gogh for some reason, but we had those prints, and just by looking at those, you're like, wow, this took a mastery of a talent to create this type of stuff. And what really sucks is that one day all that art would be gone. Think about it. One day, everything that's ever been created, everything that's ever been written, everything that's ever been music is going to be gone.
Interestingly enough, there is that website that has everything that's ever been written or could be written ever already written in it.
Yeah, but eventually the universe is going to be, just a state of homogenized light. It's just going to be basically thermal equilibrium.
Right. It's a situation where it's like everything and nothing exists all at the same time.
Yeah. So everything that's ever been written, eventually, it all will be gone. It sucks,
or at least it all won't be readable.
Well, the information is reconstructible. Information supposedly never disappears, but at some point,
so it's energy.
Entropic decay. But even in black holes, they're realizing that information still exists in some ways. You can't ever destroy information completely. That's actually one of the most fundamental laws of physics, and they don't want to even think that could ever be violated because that's a foundation for all kinds of types of physics. That information is conserved.
Yeah.
I was going to say, why don't you kind of like inform people that don't have Twitter kind of how this kind of came about if they're interested, because this was a huge thing over the weekend.
I thought it would be effective to read it backwards. So, Boole, if you could pull up the first tweet that I sent you. See if we're in order this time. I think I only sent like 4. The first tweet should be from me. That was just me calling this guy a dick. But if you look at what he said, I'm going to actually pull it up myself so I can see it a little bit easier. So
I'm looking on the outside
essentially,
because I can't read this. But go ahead.
I was trying to understand this person and what they were trying to say. And so, well, if you could scroll down a little bit to his first response to an intrigued feline, because a whole other conversation started after this. Because I asked this guy what his problem is. Like, I'm trying to understand him and ask him what the hell is going on, and he's just being an asshole. And I'm like, what is your problem? What is your problem? And he's like, you're my problem. And I'm like, well, but
Yeah,
what are
he's,
you
he's
talking
very,
about?
very confrontational. And people were trying to explain to him things that he just, was hand waving away their objections. I mean, it's great. He has a PhD in mathematics, and I'm sure he's brilliant at what he does. But when people are trying to explain to him, look, you're outside your purview here. And I have people that are experts in other fields that are philosophical fields telling him, hey, you may not acknowledge it, but every time that you do an experiment, you're using philosophy. You're using some type of a method. There is many types of scientific methods, but you're...
Hey, Steve, look who decided to throw their 2 cents in on it.
Yeah.
It's stupid.
I got rid of
yeah,
them.
of course. I could, yeah. Yeah, well, that guy, he's so worthless. But yeah, when you're dealing with science, right, you have to have some kind of guiding method, and that guiding method is philosophically driven. If you're using some type of what's called hypothetico-deductive reasoning, you're using philosophy. You're using induction. You're using philosophy. You're using deduction. You're using philosophy. And so every time he would use some kind of scientific experiment, there's a philosophical component that is constitutive of that you cannot just get rid of by hand waving it away. He doesn't have to acknowledge it, right? I mean, he could say, look,
Yeah.
I don't use philosophy. We all look at him and go, well, you're an idiot, because yes, you do, whether you acknowledge it or not. But by definition, if you're using reasoning, you're using philosophy.
Having a discussion
You cannot
about
extricate one from the
acknowledging it
other.
or not is philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird, right? Because you look at some of these people that are so scientifically minded, and by the way, I love science. I'm a huge fan of science all my life, but scientism is a problem. And when you are so fixated on just saying, hey, I'm doing science and I'm not involving philosophy, you've lost the plot. You've lost the
Yeah,
plot.
well, it's
because
both, right?
You have to use philosophy
It's-
for this.
You can't have too much of one thing. You want a nice balance of both, like pretty much in everything. Too much of a good thing. If you eat too much chocolate, you're gonna feel sick. So it's all about having balance in what you're doing. So if you want to have science, you can have a little bit more science, but you need some philosophy in there. And if you want to have only philosophy, no, you're gonna need some science. Because you start, what happens is, and I think this is why a lot of people get turned off by philosophy, is you get 2 philosophers in a room, they're at a level that nobody else is understanding a word they're saying, and they're just spinning off, talking about things that have no more
Well,
relative
scientists do the same
impact.
thing. Science speak
Right.
is difficult. 2 lawyers do the
I
same
agree.
thing. Legal speak is difficult.
I'm not saying they don't, but let me finish. If 2 philosophers are doing that, who are you to tell them that they're wrong to do that? They're having a conversation on their own into the ether of wherever the fuck they're going. They probably don't know
Yeah.
where they're going. In fact, they might be discussing the concept of even going anywhere to begin with.
Yeah, and somebody points
So-
out, I was gonna say, somebody points out like a misunderstanding of a scientist, right? Stephen Hawking. They misunderstand what he was trying to say. Stephen Hawking was talking about philosophy being dead, and he wanted to revitalize it. He came up with what's called model-dependent realism. This is a philosophical model that deals with scientific realism. That basically what is true is corresponds to what we or model shows us to be the case, rather than is something just a model that may not represent realistic things of reality. We may not know, right? There's scientific realism, scientific anti-realism, but he developed this model-dependent realism, which is philosophy. He reintroduced philosophy into the science, so he had to use philosophy. So, all these scientists, out there, every single one of them, every great scientist uses philosophy. Some of them may not recognize it, but Stephen Hawking sure did, because it came up with a whole model that is a philosophical model, not a scientific model. You look at it that way.
My Unfinished Journey for 5 says, Steel Manning here, the philosophical props he stands on are long settled and uncontroversial. True, which is why you might not realize that he's standing on those props. I can agree with that. I don't really have anything against this person outside they're kind of a condescending dick. But the thing is that if you do not acknowledge the history of where science even came from and dismisses it as if it doesn't matter, do you then get to deny and dismiss any science that came? Do you have to start from scratch every single time? Do you
Well, I
have
mean,
to?
what tells
Somebody
us, what
asked him
tells us,
what is a two, right? Like what is two?
well, that goes to abstract concepts. Abstract concepts are philosophy. I mean, but again, I mean, he's talking about axioms and things of that nature, right? And somebody was explaining to him, including me prior to this weekend, I had the same conversation with him, similar. But axioms are things that are not proven. He's like, well, we have, proving an axiom, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you don't prove axioms. Axioms are assumed. But axioms are philosophical concepts. So what are the basis from which you derive a theorem from that you can prove, or some kind of
It
scientific
doesn't.
modeling? You have to make certain
It seems
assumptions. Those assumptions are philosophical concepts.
And we've noticed this before when we've talked about things with the ACA and with flat earthers. There's nothing wrong with making an assumption.
No, not at
That's
all.
okay, as long as your assumption is justified. If you have
Yeah.
good reasoning for your assumption. I assume my door. This is like when we were talking to Snake was right. I assume the door to my house is going to open into my house. I make that
Well, even
assumption. It's
it's
okay
funny
to make
because
that assumption.
but the guy has a PhD in maths, and he knows damn well. And this is why I'm thinking he's just a contrarian of some kind, that he likes to obfuscate, because any mathematician will tell you there are certain things in math that seem paradoxical depending on which axioms you take, right? And so,
Right.
a lot of people are familiar with Hilbert's paradox or the Barber paradox, or in basic set theory, if a set of all
What
things
about
is
aliens? Isn't there an aliens one
that's all.
where it's
Well,
like,
there's Fermi's paradox.
yeah,
Fermi's paradox, Olber's paradox deals with starlight. There's a lot of perceived paradoxes that are resolvable, but mathematics is completely different, because mathematics depends on what axioms you take. And so, like Hilbert's paradox, or Barber's paradox, well, it's the same thing. But when you're talking about does the set of all things contain itself, it depends on what axioms you want to take for the specific sets. And so mathematicians know this, and they know there's problems taking certain types of axioms. But that's a philosophical concept, right? It is philosophy. Think about it. The set of all things contain itself. And there are other paradoxes out there. I talked to Chess earlier about one of my favorite paradoxes, called the Raven paradox. And this one, the Raven paradox, is fascinating because the Raven paradox is something that it doesn't seem to make sense. It's counterintuitive, but it is logically consistent, right? And what the paradox is basically is this: if I have a statement, right, that P implies Q, right, that all ravens are black, okay, then the counterpositive of that would be that anything that's not black, that's not a raven, is evidence that supports the statement all ravens are black. So if I have, this cup right here, which is green screen, because you can tell it's green because of my green screen, this is a non-black, non-raven. This is actually evidence that all ravens are black, even though it has nothing to do with ravens, which seems like a weird paradox. How is this cup evidence to my
pulls up a
supposition that
plucked chicken? Behold, a man.
it's a weird paradox, right? Because you think to yourself, wait a minute, look, normally when you do a scientific experiment, there's a couple ways you could do an experiment, right? You can look for falsification criteria, which is Popper's falsificationism, which I think there's a problem with, because if you look at a falsificationism, there's types of holistic ways of doing it called epistemological holism, where you can basically save any theorem, right? Any theory out there. And so it's hard to say what falsifies something. Like, example that I like to use is Mercury. When we saw Mercury in retrograde, right, and Newtonian physics doesn't explain this, you don't say, oh, look, Newtonian physics is falsified. Obviously relativity explained the discrepancies we had. So there's a way to save any theory in epistemological holism, but it's a good way to start of saying, hey, what are the holes of this theory? What are the falsification criteria to which we say there might be some problems, that something else might be a better explanation? But they also, with the hypothetico-deductive method, when you're looking for things that support your idea, right? If I say gravity is going to make things fall, down, and I start dropping things, I'm looking for evidence that's going to fall down too, right? But any kind of contrapositive evidence is evidence supporting my hypothesis. So with the Raven idea, the Raven paradox is that anything that's not a raven, that is not black, is evidence that all ravens are black. And there are ways to kind of get around that paradox, but again, it depends what modeling you use. And that's, by the way, what's the term for that? What starts with a P that ends in osophy? I believe it's philosophy.
Phylogenetics.
Phylogenetics. That's for Dapper Dino. I know.
Team Skeptic said, materialism versus quantum mechanics, Einstein versus Bohr, philosophical debates in the early 20th that lead to an answer via true empiricism decades later.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point, because like Bell's inequality demonstrated mathematically that local hidden variables cannot exist. And so Bell's inequality is something that has been ingrained in quantum mechanics. But early on, even Einstein had an issue with a lot of the stuff. He the local realism, whether things are transmitted between two particles by actually some kind of particle that goes between them, if it stays within a locality, or if it goes quote faster than the speed of light. Because of course Einstein's not a fan of that. He's like, no, nothing can go faster than the speed of light. However, and not even information can either. However, there seems to be some violations with that when it comes to entanglement. Because local realism is a bad thing. I don't think local realism exists.
There seems to be two kind of conflated issues, I think. And I think one is that philosophy is no longer relevant. There aren't any new philosophical arguments going into that are relative to science at all. And the other one is that, we already have from philosophy whatever we were ever going to get in the first place, so we don't need it anymore.
Yeah,
right?
That's
which
bizarre,
is dangerous.
Though.
Thinking, especially for
really
science. That's a very unscientific way of thinking about something.
Yeah, it really is. Because again, these scientists were predicated on philosophical concepts.
I don't think I've ever met a science or anybody who does science, or anybody who is a scientist, or anybody who enjoys science, or anybody who studies in any particular field that says, "Oh yeah, no, that field's done. We're done. We don't need to do any more there."
Nobody.
When has this ever happened?
Yeah.
Why would we ever?
And it's bizarre because, look, you guys remember once we were talking about the simulation theory, right? And simulation theory is a very in-depth philosophical concept based upon, three statements that not all of them could be seemingly true at one time, which would be an inconsistent logical system. But that is philosophy. So when scientists are doing experiments with this, there are actual scientists that are doing actual experiments to determine if reality is real, and if there's any substructure to it, if there's any what's called discontinuities. Right, because we think of reality as some kind of like existence, and that is contiguous. It's just basically one thing to another. But is there discrete points? Is there individual discrete points where things just stop? We would never know, right? If the universe has stopped, it completely stopped, where there's no time, would it have any relevance to us? We wouldn't even know, right? But when you look at the quantum level, where it's indiscernible, we don't even know what happens at the Planck level, at the Planck time, because it's not resolvable. So is maybe there some kind of fine structure to the universe where, hey, we're just a series of just individial events strung together like a movie? Who knows? But
I like to think that everything that's happened or is going to happen has to happen because there's no other option.
That's fatalism.
But it's so complicated. But it's so complicated that it's not predetermined.
Yeah,
you cannot predetermine what's going to happen.
I have an issue with fatalism, because fatalism would be, like you said, everything's predetermined. It can only end in one way. And at the quantum level, we know there's too much stochastic randomness, even for us. I mean, we can never determine anything. But even if you took the stochastic aspect out, even if we couldn't determine anything, if we didn't even exist, right? No human was around to apprehend the universe. It was just completely mechanistic. Mm-hmm. I still think that it could not be a fatalism thing. Deterministic, yes, but because of inherent randomness in the universe, I don't think there is only one way it must end up, right?
The way I kind of get around that in my thinking, again, I could be wrong. I do art. What the fuck do I know? The way I think about it is that if you're dealing with a situation or a universe that has multiples within it, where when something diverges, and now you've got multiple, well, good, those multiple ones still just keep going the exact way they would have to go if something that is catalytic
Well, that's the
to that happen.
that's the multi-world hypothesis, where each individual event will branch off into other events. And there's reasons why people have that as a model, right? That is a philosophical model just as much as it's a scientific model, because again, you have the multi-world hypothesis, or you have the Copenhagen interpretation. But either one of them, real quick, both of them want to explain the same thing, right? Both of them want to explain the same thing that science looks at. Science looks at an observation, and because of what's called the measurement problem, when a wave function collapses, they look at it differently and say, well, this is one possible model to explain this. This is another possible model to explain this. And then you have other, like,
even know why light behaves differently based on whether you're observing it or not, because that's a thing that happens.
Well, it's the thing is all of them work. All those models do explain things, right? The pilot wave theory does explain things. Unfortunately, it uses more assumptions, and it uses very complicated maths called the path integral formula, which is way beyond what I'll ever get into. But it basically, things exist at all points at all times, and then it takes path of least resistance to get from point A to point B. But when you're looking at these models, you cannot say, we can't say, or I certainly can't say, this is the one that is reality, right? Is the Copenhagen model reality, or is the multi-world?
You have to use philosophy to start deciding why you may not buy
pick one and go with it.
Over another. And so we've gotten a little bit to the abstract and to the complicated. Let's bring it back a little bit and go back to what this guy had said. So Dr. Matt Hunt over here says, actually in science, we don't even touch on philosophy. It's all about science. And his main citation for this was, read my papers. Here's the thing. You need philosophy to write a paper. You're you're communicating and you're making an argument in a paper.
When you say I believe, I think, I conclude, whatever, if you have a conclusion to your paper and you're trying to do a persuasive argument, that's all philosophy. I'm sorry, you cannot avoid it.
Justify something. Justification is philosophy.
And here's a fun fact. Here's a fun fact for you. I don't know if I've told this before, but we'll see if people remember. If you go to Wikipedia and you type in any search you want, find any search, start with any entry in Wikipedia that you want, go to the first hyperlink in the paragraph, in the main body, not the etymology or the Greek or anything like that, but in the description, go to the first hyperlink you find. Then in the next one, go to the first hyperlink you find, and then the next one. No matter how many times you do it, eventually it'll always come back to philosophy page. Every time, whether it be in 5, 6, 10, 20, 30, it's designed that way. They've actually tested this with a crawler. So if you really want to freak yourself out, go do this. It works. I've done it numerous times.
My favorite is still when you play the game where you go to a random Wikipedia page and see how many clicks it takes for you to get to Hitler.
Oh, I haven't seen that, but it does eventually go to philosophy.
You haven't seen that one? Oh, that's so much fun. We should do that one time on one of these shows. We'll see. Okay, we're gonna play the Wikipedia game. All three of us will open a window and we'll click and say, okay, what page are you on? Okay, what page did you get? What page did you... And then we'll all see how long it takes each of us to get to Hitler. How many clicks?
Yeah, well, that's a great game to play. How many clicks to Hitler? Yeah, sounds like a battle of like the Allies coming in. Click is a kilometer. So. Yeah,
I get it.
in the bunker. Did you ever watch that movie? I never watched the whole movie, but I've watched the scene a million times. When Hitler's in the bunker and he realizes he's being captured and he doesn't want to leave and he's all yelling at his generals.
Oh yeah. I love that clip. It's a good clip. It was well filmed.
That acting was brilliant.
At one point, this Dr. Matt guy, his philosophy of mathematics is a load of navel-gazing wank. That would be the next one down, Boole. So if we look a little bit, if we look a little bit up a little bit about what he's talking about, Steve is talking about analysis and number theory, right? Like if you're doing math and you can't explain what a number is, maybe you should learn what a number is because that's relative to your field, right?
Yeah, and he had also asked a question like, well, what what are the axioms of a field kind of thing. And by the way, I put in the video description, Dr. William Fye, that's not his real name, that's a pseudonym, but he did a brief thing for me where he did a really brief introduction to fields, groups, rings, monads, semi-groups, and explaining what they are. And he did a really great job. And I had him a guest writer as my blog, and so I put that in the description. That is philosophical. It's not just mathematical. There's absolute philosophical underpinnings of what is constitutive of these types of things we call a field, or we call a ring.
I noticed how he says logic is properly a branch of maths. No. Boolean algebra, and this is my bailiwick here, Boolean algebra is derived from logic, not the other way around.
I agree with that, but I don't really fully agree with like Ozzy. Ozzy thinks that math and logic are completely kind of extricated from each other. He doesn't think one is a subset of the other. The intrigued feline thinks that mathematics is she thinks that mathematics is a subset of logic, and I think logic is a subset of mathematics. But again, these are philosophical things. There's no one right answer. All three of us could be completely right. It depends on how you want to look at it, right?
I would probably just say both.
I mean, but it is a philosophical question. Boolean logic is a type of logic, clearly.
But him saying that is philosophy, like literally.
Yeah.
Well, what he's trying to prove, as far as what is his argument though? He's basically saying, hey, he doesn't give a crap about philosophy, therefore nobody else should. Or I don't know what he's trying to argue. I never did. He's just wants to be a contrarian. That's all.
If you look at what he actually said, the full sentence with the logic is properly a branch of mathematics, by the way. He said, we use science and analysis a lot of the time. There is zero philosophy in my scientific papers. What is analysis, then? You've separated it from science, but you're saying it's not philosophy, so what is analysis?
I cannot resolve that statement. When he says there's zero philosophy in their scientific papers, I think to myself this, and I'm not trying to be a pedant. I'm not trying to be contrarian. I honest to God not. But this is my brain at work. When I see that, I think to myself, okay, so you're arguing that there is no reasoning in your paper.
Yes.
And am I out of line for that? Because reason is philosophy. I'm sorry. You cannot say that you wrote a scientific paper and then say, well, I'm using reason here to determine something by experimentation, and then say that's not philosophy. Absolutely it is. Reason is philosophy.
He tried to say that reason wasn't philosophy, and my question is, what is it then?
I don't know what else
it's not philosophy, and you're, like I said with analysis, you said science and analysis. You've separated analysis from science, and now you've also separated analysis from philosophy. What is it? Is it chemistry? Is it...
I don't know what else would fall under.
Woo? Is it astrology? What is it?
I don't think he has an explanation for that.
No, he never answered me.
But he's like one of these people that will say, "Oh, well, there's no problem with Hume's problem of induction because I use it in science. Therefore, it has utility and there's no problems." And by the way, that is way one Popper uses that.
Doesn't mean it doesn't have problems. Lots of things have utility that have problems.
But
pollution is a problem. It's got utility.
But one way to get rid of Hume's problem of induction is basically say it doesn't exist, what Karl Popper tried doing, and I think he's completely wrong for that. I'm not a big fan of Popper, by the way. I know, okay, a lot of people are not big fans of Popper in the philosophical community, but I think that doesn't resolve anything, right? Just by saying the problem doesn't exist because you use it doesn't resolve the actual underlying epistemological problems with induction. And I think that Matt here is one of those people that says, "Oh, look, there's no problem with induction, justifying an induction because I use it," which is a circular argument. And by saying it's a circular argument, it has to use philosophy. But if you don't use philosophy, you don't understand what a circular argument is, you're not going to understand why Hume's problem of induction is still an ongoing problem.
Teams in the chat saying analysis is a necessary step to empiricism. Empiricism is philosophy. Don't.
Yeah. And by the way, I have nothing against empiricism. But I'm sorry, I think that if you limit your epistemological framework merely to empiricism, you have done yourself no service, because if you don't imply rationalism as well, then you're basically just saying only thing that I can know, only thing that I can, have any understanding of and apprehend is anything that I observe a posteriori. So if they'll actually
you sound
deny
like
a
a
priori
flurfer when you
knowledge.
said that. You sounded like a flurfer when you said that, by the way.
Well, that's what they do. That's what they sound like to me, right? I mean, there are people that can have a coherent system that say, look, I deny a priori knowledge. I had a person on Facebook the other day. They were into empiricists, but every answer they gave me was consistent. And this guy knew philosophy, and I was like, okay, at least you're consistent. I don't agree with you because I take a different approach, but you're not one of those people that is inconsistent in your reasoning, right? I mean, because to be a true empiricist, to deny a priori knowledge is to be almost like a Pyrrhonian skeptic, to say, look, we can't even know what knowledge is because this person denied all forms of knowledge. Okay, at least you're coherent. Right. You're consistent about that. If you're a true skeptic and you are a Pyrrhonian skeptic, where you say, look, I don't even know if knowledge is even possible, or if you outright deny knowledge, I'm okay with that if that's your philosophy.
Never go full solipsism. Never go full solipsism, because you end up in this situation where it's like you're and nothing. There's no point in having the conversation anymore.
But the point is, it's not philosophically unsound.
It's not
right?
philosophical.
I mean,
It's
you could be a diehard skeptic. You could say no knowledge is possible. I think that's perfectly fine if you can justify it. I'd rather go the opposite route. I think knowledge is possible, but neither who knows is right. That's philosophy. That's philosophy.
I think that there's a break in where people start no longer understanding or thinking that philosophy is a waste of time. And that breaking point is essentially either with language, like they don't understand the jargon of philosophical terms, or when you start talking about things that are no longer functioning in reality. So a philosophical argument can be completely logically sound. It can make complete sense. However, it can have no basis in that person's life, so they have nothing to tie it to that makes it make any sense. And when that happens, there's a break in their understanding of what's even being talked about anymore. So if you say, hey, how do you know that if you open the door to your house, it's going to go into your house? And when you say the answer is you don't, you start to lose people, because they have to make that assumption to be able to function in their day-to-day life. So when you break that point of rationality, it doesn't mean philosophically something's not rational. It doesn't mean it's not logical. But you've stepped away from where most people are going to understand what's
well, that's what this guy kind of does, though. I mean, his argument is basically, I don't care if I can justify if the door is going to open or not, if gravity's going to work tomorrow. I use it, therefore that's all I need in my job. That's basically what he's trying to say. Okay, fine. That works for you, right? But that still does not negate the inherent properties, philosophically speaking. So I think it's fine for people to say, look, I just do science, I just do experiment. But to say that it doesn't involve philosophy, that I have huge umbrage with, because that's just prima facie stupid. Sure. I mean, that's just on its face ridiculous to say that I have a persuasive argument. I'm using things like logos, ethos, pathos. I'm using hypothetico-deductive reasoning. I'm using beliefs. It's like wait a minute. Here's the question, Chesh. He wrote a scientific paper, and you ask him, do you believe your paper's correct? As soon as he has a belief, he's using epistemology, which is philosophy.
Yes,
I mean, it's
or
bizarre to me.
If you're writing an analysis, if you're writing an analysis of whatever mathematics you used, what persuasive argument are you using to come to those conclusions? What persuaded you? Mm-hmm. What is supposed to persuade anybody else? That's philosophy. I've spent actually a surprisingly large amount of time engaged in philosophy without having any goddamn idea I was doing philosophy.
A lot of people do that.
And I think I think most people do. When you're discussing something with your significant other, you're using philosophy. If you're on opposing sides about why you think something is the case, should be the case, or isn't the case, that's philosophy. If you're arguing with your, so let's say I'm discussing whether or not I'm not married, but let's say I have a husband. Let's say me and my husband are discussing whether or not we want our kid to know about Santa Claus. That's philosophy. Do I want to raise my child in this way or in this way? Do I want them to have this belief and what the ramifications of that belief system is? Or do I want them to do something else? That's all philosophy. If you're able to recognize argumentation and you're able to recognize fallacies and fallacious argumentation, that's philosophy. At one point, this guy tried to accuse 82 of a straw man. One, it was not a straw man.
Yeah,
Two,
well,
we expect this guy who thinks that this isn't relevant its philosophy isn't relevant to anything I do. I barely paid attention to it, but I'm going to say that you are committing a logical fallacy.
Yeah, I don't know.
Can you please explain to me what a logical fallacy is without using philosophy?
Well, even more egregious. What happens if you said, and your husband said, we want to have a boy, and we want him to have blue eyes, and we want him to have blonde hair, and you want to use CRISPR editing and eugenics and all this other stuff. Science doesn't tell you whether that's good, bad, or different. Science is objective. It says, hey, we can do this. Where the efficacy concern comes in is bioethics, which is philosophy.
Right. Yep. Any kind of gene editing, any kind of if you ever have a child that is born sick, and I'm so sorry if that's ever happened to you, there are decisions you need to make, and those go with your what are your ethics? What do you want to do? That doesn't mean you get to impose your ethics on other people. There are discussions that can be had there, but you still have to have an internal discussion with yourself about what you want to do in that situation, and there are multiple variables and there are discussions to be had and have a support system, but that's all of that is philosophy. If you're at the grocery store and you're deciding whether or not you want to eat spaghetti next week and your significant other wants lasagna and you're employing argumentation,
I figure if they're making dinner, I'll eat it. That's the easiest rule of thumb. Go with it, whatever they want. The intrigued feline asked an interesting question. She says, just a question. What is your understanding of scientific paradigms and their shifts? And I think she's referring to Thomas Kuhn's. The thing with paradigm shift is this. And I'll relate to your answer this way. I had discussions about this very thing with a friend of mine who has a PhD in math. Was it physics or mathematics? I don't know. It's philosophy, but he had a minor in applied mathematics. And his brother was a chemist. And so we were talking about whether things relating to chemistry is the fundamental reality is more chemical or physical, right? When you look at even the simple hydrogen atom, a lot of it is physics, right? The orbital mechanics, when you're looking at chemical bonds, pi bonds. But you're looking at a very specific paradigm of what is more fundamental, physics or chemistry. And these are paradigm shifts of when you say, okay, there's something to be fundamentally different from our way of thinking. We instead of thinking of things like relating to alchemy and chemistry, it is now, underlying things is not chemical. It's not these chemical things are not chemical in nature, but more a physical thing when it comes to physics. Physics being a more base level, and I argue that as well. But his brother argues that it's chemical. But this would be a huge paradigm shift. And there's minor paradigm shifts too, like for example Newtonian physics to Einstein relativity. But even that relativity had to account for Newtonian physics, right? But there's still a paradigm shift to be had because people were going at one time. They thought if you were in a bullet train going 100 miles an hour, you would die, right? So there's a whole bunch of things that people had misconceptions of, but then Einstein comes around and says, hey, look, I'm going to relook at the entire way of reality, saying, look, you cannot go faster than the speed of light, period. Not even information. People are like, well, why? But he was able to demonstrate it using math, and we've done it experimentally now. That was a paradigm shift, in my opinion. I hope that answers your question. So I think paradigm shifts exist, and I think they're very beneficial to science. So when chemistry went to physics, I think that's a paradigm shift.
The ethical treatment of animals. You can look at that from a purely mathematical standpoint. You can say, listen, what we should do is have the right amount for the right amount of people. How much does this person need to eat in a day? How many people are there? You can solve that mathematically. But why do you care to solve it?
Well,
And how do you
worse than this,
implement? And how do you implement your the changes that you need to make when you've solved that problem?
let me ask you this: you're in a hospital. You know, you're unhealthy, but you're not exactly going to die. But you're not in the best of shape. You've got 12 people that are dying. Why can't the doctor just harvest your organs to save them? I mean, that would be an argument from utility, wouldn't it be? The best of what's for society. It's pure utilitarianism type argument, which I'm not a fan of utilitarianism, obviously, but that is a philosophical argument.
You could actually argue that the other way too, and say maybe it's not beneficial to society to save 12 people.
Yeah, or you have, you know, these are ethical considerations that people ask all the time. You've got a person, let's say, like there's one heart. Does it go to the, you know, the person who has a more skill set to help society, or does it go to the underprivileged person who may not have the chance to even go to have education yet? I mean, these are tough medical decisions. Yeah.
You've got blood. You've only got one pack left. You can only save one person. Do you save the child or do you save the adult?
Yeah, and there's philosophical arguments for either.
Stephen Hawking. Right? Yeah. You don't know who that child's going to be. That child could be Hitler.
Well, or the same thing. Should you go back in time? Should you kill baby Hitler? Which, by the way, I don't believe in backwards time travel. I don't. But if hypothetically, if you could.
I mean, there is an argument to say that if backward time travel existed, it already happened.
Yeah, no, I think that if I do believe, was it? Yeah, I think it was Hawking. They actually said if time travel is a thing, where are all the time travelers? I mean, this has been an ongoing thing. This is one of the greater counterexamples that shows that time travel is impossible. Is that we haven't ran into one yet.
We do
because
know
if time
that
travel existed, they should be around.
Time travel. Yeah. We do know a couple of people who are immortal, as far as we know. Keanu Reeves is one of them.
I was thinking more. Rolling Stones, Keith Richards, but yeah.
Yeah, there
Betty
you go.
White.
There's another example. Yeah.
John Titor. You know what's funny is I thought we were supposed to have that guy that was supposed to be John Titor on the Non Sequitur show. Supposedly it was him. Now again, you know that was a complete hoax. That guy was not time travel, obviously. But if you guys do you remember that story with that the time travel guy from John Titor? Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just. I think that time travel might be possible on the quantum level. That's it.
If backwards time travel was possible, people have already gone back in time. We're already living through what happened with people time traveling. Right?
Or they just never developed it. We died before we had a chance to
I'm saying if it did. If it did exist and it was developed, then yeah. People decided to, like, people chose to not kill baby Hitler for whatever reason, and we don't know what that reason would be.
I mean, obviously, forward time travel is completely possible as far as you want to go. I mean, right now, if we wanted to do it, we probably could send somebody. You know,
I'm a woman. I don't want to go backwards anyway.
But obviously you can't come back. So what's the point? But if somebody said to you, hey, do you want to go 1,000 years in the future, 10,000 years in the future, millions in the future? I would, if it wasn't from like my daughter, I would have to give serious consideration to that. That would be awesome. I mean, yeah, I would leave behind everything, but the chance to go see what the world is like, in the far future, think of the things that you would be able to know and discover. I'm like, that to me would be amazing.
But think about how bad it could go too. Like, it could be completely inhospitable to you once you woke up.
Correct. Yeah, it's a chance that you got to take, right? It could be nuclear war. It could be, an asteroid hit us. Like we got Apophis or whatever the asteroid in 2069 is supposed to hit us.
There's like a huge amount of psychological ramifications that you'd have to deal with. Like, people feel weird when they go to another country. What do you think happens when you show up 100 years in the future and you recognize nothing?
Oh yeah, you'd be completely out of time. Yeah, I mean that's completely true. I mean, have you besides America, because it's not too different from Canada, have you ever been to like an Asian country?
No.
Have you been to Hong Kong or okay? It is an entirely different world. Singapore, Hong Kong, Korea. And by the way, I really enjoy those types of countries. I loved it over there. Big fan. And Asian company, I mean, the Philippines was great. Thailand, South Korea, I loved them all. But it is, you realize you are not in America. you're definitely
Yeah.
know that you're just not. It's a completely different type lifestyle.
I did enjoy. Okay, so I'm not a big fan of time travel movies most of the time. There's only really two that I like, and it's Back to the Future because it's a closed loop for the most part, and The Time Traveler's Wife, I think is the other one.
Yeah, I've seen that one.
If I'm
Yeah.
remembering correctly. I like the one where the moon gets like half exploded. Like, listen, it's not realistic, and I'm okay with that.
One of my favorite, if you haven't seen it, is Safety Not Guaranteed. One of the best. That is a cult movie. If you guys have never seen that movie, go watch it and then leave a comment what you think of it, because that is one of my all-time favorite time traveling movies. Is Safety Not Guaranteed. Brilliant movie.
I saw
Just brilliant.
somebody do a breakdown about why the time traveling car wouldn't work, and it has to do nothing with the car itself or the sci-fi stuff. It has to do with the Earth moves. So traveling, if you were going to time travel from this point, you would have to you'd have to go to a time period where the Earth was in the same position.
Right, but there's ways around that, because what they would do is they use a geopositioning from like the galactic center, and they use absolute reference. If you could, okay. Again, this is philosophy. Is there an absolute reference point to the universe? Right? Is there? Like, an example?
And math would tend to disprove that, because we can all compute our position as the center of the universe.
Well, well, yes and no. I disagree with you a little bit on that. That doesn't show that there cannot be an absolute reference point.
No, it doesn't show. It's evidence to the contrary, though.
But you start adding in multiple dimensions, and things go really kind of chaotic. Matter of fact, one of the ways of resolving the information paradox for black holes is they're looking at fifth-dimensional things. But I mean, do I think there's an absolute reference point? No, right? I do not think there actually is. But that is a philosophical concept. Is, hey, could I have a space-time continuum, equations that can get me to where the Earth used to be? Exactly pinpoint. Yeah, in theory, you could do it mathematically, but it wouldn't be using an absolute reference. It would just be using a reverse, mathematical formula of where things are. If you knew, because look, if you knew the state of every particle in the universe, you could be able to predict things, right? Assuming quantum fluctuations don't hinder that, but but generally we can, right?
Stupid.
What?
Click.
What?
I don't know if that counts as a time travel movie, though. The Adam Sandler one where he's got the remote control and he fast forwards through time.
Oh yeah, that was good.
And then that's more of like a what's the Christmas movie? It's a Wonderful Life. It's more like, oh, you got to see all of the life that you had if you skipped all these events. Now wake up from your dream and go and have your life.
If you want the definitive time travel movie that's most realistic. And it was a very, very low budget movie. Very low budget. It was like tens of thousands of dollars it made much more than that. But it was a movie called Primer.
Okay.
Primer was a low budget movie. One of the best. You know what? I'm just gonna say it is the definitive best time travel movie if you're looking for something that is like at least semi-realistic. It was absolutely amazing. I wouldn't let you guys down. Go watch those two movies and tell me what you think.
Was it called Primer? And Primer. What else?
Safety Not Guaranteed. Wow. Safety Not Guaranteed was a lot more lighthearted. Yeah. But those are really good movies.
Scroll up a little bit. Dr. Matt here decides to say, if you're going down that route, why doesn't chemistry reference alchemy anymore? Or more? Anybody want to answer that question?
I don't know what he's going for with this.
He's trying to compare philosophy to something like abstract that doesn't exist and isn't used. It's magic. I mean, does alchemy as a writing in a fantasy novel count? Because that gets used. That get used a lot.
But even still, alchemy was based upon observations. It was based upon, hey, can we do transmutations? And by the way, even though certain chemical reactions are prohibited, right? It's like lead to gold is prohibited. Chemical wise, we actually can create and do transmutations using nuclear chemistry. And so with nuclear chemistry, things are not as cut and dry as they appear to be. We can actually do transmutations, which would have been alchemy centuries ago, right? So Just saying,
Well, if
we,
you could
we
pull
can't
up the
we
last
can't do
one.
a lot more than we could before, even though it's not strictly chemical, it's nuclear chemistry. But to an alchemist, that would have been amazing. We can create gold in the laboratory. We can create diamonds now at room temperature, supposedly. I mean, which is
But it's not considered alchemy anymore,
carbon structure,
right?
No, it's not alchemy.
It's not considered alchemy anymore, though.
Alchemy
Would you
had
call that a paradigm?
Well,
because like the concept of turning something like lead into gold was considered magic. It was considered alchemy,
there was magical
and it
overtones.
didn't work.
Stone, yeah.
So does chemistry now being able to do that now does the concept of being able to change something from one thing into another still count as alchemy, or has the concept just been enveloped into?
Yeah, I think it falsifies alchemy because even though we can do it, it wasn't the way alchemy claimed. Yeah, because alchemy, as you said, had completely.
It was about the claim and how they went about it, not the concept of actually changing something from one thing to another. You can do what you can have, which is a concept in more than one. Yeah, and you can have a concept in more than one field, right? So you can have evolution can cover history, sociology, biology. It doesn't just geology. It doesn't have to just be in biology, right? You can study evolution of society. You can study the evolution of writing. You can study evolution is such a broad term.
Well, how about this?
I mean, it's specific in biology, but
the show Discovery, Star Trek Discovery, has what's called programmable matter, and it's very similar to what I would imagine with these replicators, right? When you want to replicate something, so we could. I mean, in theory, sure, if you had enough energy in a system, I don't see why you couldn't create anything you want. Really, I mean, it's just changing the states. Yeah, if you could actually, in theory, do it. I don't see why you couldn't. If it's energy efficient to do so.
There are two things that will change the world as we know it that are essentially breakthroughs. People are working on it, and we just don't know how long it's going to take because it's a breakthrough, and that's how breakthroughs work. They don't really have a schedule. It's not like, oh, I've got enough experience points and now I unlock this thing. It's by nature. And they are something that produces more energy than it takes to put in.
It's not over unity.
Yes, that's impossible. Being able, currently we can turn matter into energy, but we can't turn energy into matter.
Well, actually, kind of can. Okay, two things on that. One, first of all, I believe that over unity is impossible. I believe that you can never have more energy out of a system than what you put in. Okay, that violates thermodynamic laws. That is impossible. Energy into matter actually happens all the time. I mean, we can actually take energy and make it into matter. Is it programmable matter to what we say? We want that energy to be a very specific form of matter, right? The crystalline structure, the atomic structure.
Exactly, yes.
I don't see
we can't control it. The breakthrough is being able to dictate when, where, and what it turns into. Right? Because that changes everything, especially economically.
So the second one's possible. The first one you think is possible, or you think over unity is possible?
I don't know. I've heard a couple of people talking about it a couple of years ago, and they've gotten surprisingly close. So I'd like to think so. I would like to think that it would be very cool to see, and it would solve and create a whole ton of problems that I kind of would just love to be a fly on the wall and observe that happen. But I don't know. I would be agnostic about it.
Yeah, I think it's just a fundamental thing that this is not going to be possible.
You're probably right, but
I mean, because that's like a quackery thing.
It just changes everything.
But here's something that people don't realize: we are surrounded by so much energy. If you could actually have 100% equivalence of mass into energy, energy would not be a problem. I mean, there's enough energy in a golf ball to power a small city for a very long time. I mean, if you again, this is a 100% conversion, which only really exists when it comes to things like complete particle annihilation, gamma rays. Those are going to be 100% just into energy. Or if you got like two black holes, that a lot of that energy is converted into.
Humans are dicks. Right? We would disintegrate Jupiter if we thought it would get us better burgers.
Yeah, well, we just don't have the ability to do so yet. I mean, there will be. I think we will advance
Right.
to the point where we can
We
figure out how to
totally
take
would.
trash and have an infinite supply of energy, just about for all practical purposes. I mean, the sun is a
Right,
massive
exactly.
amount of energy. We still don't even know how to tap that properly.
Right.
So
So once
energy is
we
not
have
a
a little
problem.
bit
Energy is
more,
all around us. How to make it utilized?
yeah,
The
even if we
amount
can't,
the amount of energy the sun is bombarding the earth with is more than enough to sustain us.
Oh,
And
yeah,
that's just what's hitting the earth. That's not counting what goes off in every other direction.
and there's also quantum energy around us. It's not usable
Right.
energy, but it's all around us.
there's absolutely nothing
point
to
energy
say
is
that we
called.
couldn't essentially build a ring, like a ball,
Oh.
essentially around the
Dyson
sun and
sphere.
collect all
She's
of the
talking
energy and
Dyson
utilize
spheres
that.
now.
Yeah, Dyson sphere. Mhm.
Yeah,
You got to leave some holes in it though, so that you don't build up too much heat, because
yeah,
that could be a
superheater
problem.
cells. Bull, could you
Yeah.
pull up the next one, please? You see how
Well,
these
soon
like
as-
things just go off because everything applies to everything all the time? Because like the main thing I was thinking about with this kind of a change is economics. If you can change energy into whatever matter you can, you no longer have to pay for stuff. You would
Well, how
have to
about-
pay for like theoretically the energy and the blueprint for that thing, but then you'd be able to create as many as you wanted as soon as you had the fucking blueprint.
Yeah, but how about like that asteroid they discovered that has like $20 trillion worth of nickel and iron? I mean, what would that do to the economy? And by the way, we know planets
Yeah,
that rain
exactly.
diamonds, right? I mean,
The economy is
only
such
reason
a fragile garbage thing that we just invented for no reason.
because there is intrinsic value of certain things. Like gold has an intrinsic value. It's based upon the amount of gold solely rather than extrinsic, which would be like fiat money. But we only have these things have value because of the scarcities involved.
Right.
Like diamonds
it's
are. We all know
entirely based
diamonds.
on-
We all
Yeah.
know diamonds are artificially inflated, right? Diamonds are not as scarce as people think they are. It's only hyperinflated because one company kind of rules them all, and they determine how much is in the marketplace. But we know
Mhm.
asteroids are out there and things are out there. They're just basically all diamond. If we got our hands on as
Yep.
much unlimited diamonds, gold, and some of the rare metals used for semiconductors, what would happen to our economy?
What changes is the economy changes from being materialistic based to being skill based. It doesn't matter how many diamonds you have when you have an infinite number and everybody can have an infinite number. The resource is no longer what's valuable. What you can do with the resource becomes valuable.
Yeah, I think that's very
where the
contingent on
economy-
population size.
Yes.
I think right now
Yeah.
the Earth. I'm not sound like a fatalist, but I'm telling you, the Earth right now is reaching critical states as far as overpopulation.
Absolutely.
We need to explore other options. There's just no doubt about it.
We need to. There's two ways that I think there's one way that I think would be really fun that I think we should do, and it's essentially if anybody's played a resource management game, that.
Mhm.
If we want people should be the ones solving the problem, not a singular government. People. There have been games that universities have put out where they're like, "Hey, solve this game," and they're basically people are playing on their phones to mix together different. Well, it wasn't atoms, was it? It was. They were trying to sequence something. I can't remember what it was. They were trying to sequence something that nobody had been able to sequence for a really long time because they just did not have the manpower to be able to push through the sequence that needed because it was all just trial and error. So what they did was they turned it into a game, they released it to the public, and then everybody was playing this game, and they unlocked it in like a couple of days because there was just
it's called
so
distributive
much
computer
content.
power. Yeah,
Exactly.
distributive
We
computing.
should be doing
They
that
said it as the same
with
thing.
our resources. We should be doing that with our resources the exact same way, which would then allow people and governments to be like, okay, so because this is so much information to process, we're going to put it to the people and we're going to let them see what works in distributing what things. We're going to give them these things. This is what we have access to. This is the amount of money. Turn it into a game and let the population of the planet redistribute where things need to go.
Are you talking about, because they might be right, you talking about protein folding?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah, protein folding. Yeah, that's called the folding problem in biology. One of the things with the folding problem is computational power. It's folding of protein is extremely complicated because you have so many amino acids being involved that could have different interactions with each other called conformational changes. That when you have these proteins, it's almost impossible to simulate how they're going to be folded. And by the way, we have some disagreement in the audience, so we can block all these people now that disagree. But they say that population is not over. Yeah, I think the Earth is overpopulated.
I actually agree with Leo.
Definitely have. I disagree with Leo. I think that the Earth is overpopulated for our resources. Right now, like I said, if there was more distribution, but you have concentrations of societal growths that are in a small area that doesn't have the resources to sustain, whether it be the actual resources or for jobs. And so it is overpopulated in that sense. I mean, but it needs more distribution. I mean, we have a lot of area that's unexplored. We have a lot of area that is uninhabited. But if we start inhabiting those areas, how does that affect the biodome that we live in? We don't want to start chopping down all these rainforests. But I mean, like in Africa, a lot of it is unpopulated. It's a big continent, by the way. But I think that as a whole, we are overpopulated.
The best way to solve that kind of a problem is humans need to find a better way of living that is more allotted for the biodiversity of the area. So humans need to do less deconstruction and reconstruction and more learn to exist with what is already there, as well as with the amount that we can distribute things, right? So if you have people living in the desert, you do not need to terraform the desert. You can leave it a desert. You just have to harvest what you can from that desert and harvest what you can from over here. And the people over here, just give them the things that they need, and they just give them the things that they need and distribute things properly. So then, like,
you're talking about the desert, though. But you're looking at the desert, right? And I'm a desert dweller. I mean, I've lived most of my life in desert communities. Desert living is difficult, but one of the big things is obviously irrigation, right? So we have crops here. We have, even though it's a desert, it's arid, it's dry, but we have crops that they do have out here. But when you start going to like the deeper in the Mojave Desert or San Jacinto area, going up toward like Barstow and over the I-5 and Yucca Valley and Joshua Tree, these are almost areas that are going to be very difficult at all to even have irrigation for. You have to tap into the groundwater. But that, again, there's a huge ecosystem there. And when you start developing cities there, you start developing, habitats there, it does have an effect on. In fact, just even in where I used to live, they were doing construction, and what it did was it affected the scorpions of the area. What are they called? They're not spiders. They're called solids. What are those things called? They're not quite scorpions. They're not quite spiders. They're the ugliest things in the world. Sun spider. They're called a sun spider, but they're not exactly a spider. Ugly. You used to get those all the time because their habitats were being infringed upon by some of the construction, and so you get these little things running after you because they see the darkness, so they kind of run after it, and they can't bite from what I understand. But camel spiders, sulfogoids, solifogoids, or I can't pronounce it. Solifugoids. Thank you, Doctor. Yeah, Dinah would know. Solifugoids. Those things. I'm sorry, but I'm telling you, this is philosophy. If there's a Satan, he came up with them. They are from the devil. They are evil incarnate. The only thing that even comes close to them was called
basically look like face huggers, and they basically behave like face huggers.
Yes, there are Satan. Them and potato bugs. Those are
I like whip scorpions. Whip scorpions are cool. I like the guys with the big long arms. So they don't have the tail like the standard scorpion has. They have instead of having a tail, they have big long front arms, and they gonna grab you. They got little grabby hands. You can grab.
Yeah, they're all. Sound it out, Steve. Solifugoids. Okay, solifugoids.
Okay, well,
I told you I have certain words.
the thing is that at the end of the day, it's a matter of managing ourselves and managing those resources and being able to be efficient with our space and how we're using it. So you can build a factory for for farming. You don't have to farm outdoors anymore. You can do it entirely in a indoor, like 2-story tall. And if you're smart and you're efficient with what you grow there, you can grow a lot of food. A lot of food. And if we're in a position where we can essentially create the proteins that we need without using animals, that
I'm okay with that.
That creates a
steak
system
that tastes the same. I'll eat it. Yeah.
That creates a system where it doesn't mean never eat meat again, but it means that we no longer need the excessive amount of cows. We don't need the excessive amount of land space. You don't need to feed them. Somebody said outdoors is cheaper. Are you sure? Because not about the one I read about. They built one in Japan already.
I'm a huge fan of like some vegan meals, and I really want to try mushroom jerky one of these days. That looked amazing. Mushroom jerky.
Yes, it is for certain kind of crops.
I would totally try mushroom jerky. I would go. If we could have
gravy is really good.
Mushroom gravy, yeah. But this is like meat. This is like literally meat that's made out of it's a chalky mushroom instead. But the stuff, most of the vegetarian stuff that I've had before in the past was very heavily driven on tofu, which I'm not a huge fan of. But some tofu dishes I've had, tofu with curry, really good. Tofu that's trying to pretend it's chicken, not so much.
It's about
so it really depends.
Diversifying their diet more and making it something that's going to be more more efficient and just better for you in general. And it doesn't mean
if you
go
have
vegan,
the right kind of proteins, yes.
Eat fish. It doesn't mean never have these things again. It just means be reasonable about it.
Well, remember the philosophical argument.
America is a little bit unreasonable about its diet.
But remember, Cosmic Skeptic, I gotta admit, the guy has a really good argument for ethical veganism. Not gonna front. It is very difficult to assail. Is it assailable? Sure. But when like Matt Dillahunty didn't even bother to try to even assail it. He just waved it away by fiat like he does anything else that he doesn't want to try to actually put some thought into. But his argument is a very in-depth philosophical argument about cognitive dissonance. And I think that he makes a good point. Now, does that make me want to not eat meat? No. Is it convincing? No. But does that make it a bad argument? Oh, completely not the case. It's a very good argument, as a matter of fact, because we do have cognitive dissonance, and we do recognize it in ourselves. Look, if person puts a piece of beef in front of you, like a ribeye steak, most of us are going to be like, just dine in. But they put a puppy, a cooked puppy, you're going to be like, no, I'm not going to eat that. Why? It's still meat, right? Because we have a different level in our head of what constitutes what we could eat.
Different value, different
values,
yes.
Axiology, exactly. And so we have a cognitive dissonance there that we say, oh, okay, it's okay to eat in one case, but not another, right? And even still, like certain things, like for example, this is cognitive dissonance, and I recognize it that I have it, just like most people have. It doesn't mean that we're not critical thinkers, especially when you recognize that you have it. But for example, I love lobster, right? Love lobster. One of the most ugliest things you've ever seen in the sea. It's not a good-looking creature. But somebody puts a scorpion in front of me, I'm not going to eat it, even if it tastes like lobster. Why?
I actually don't have dissonance. That. Yeah, I actually don't have that particular one. I would eat my dog. I would eat my dog if that was the situation I was in.
Well, I'm not saying. Look, if you're starving, sure, I'll score.
Like if I were to move
you have to.
So some
cannibalism
people keep guinea pigs. Some people keep guinea pigs as pets, and some people eat guinea pigs.
Rabbits
I would eat a guinea pig.
Well, rabbits. I've eaten a rabbit.
If I'm living in an area
I love rabbits, though.
Where the prominent feed animal is a dog, I'll probably eat a dog.
I don't think I could, though. But like I said,
have an ethical quandary there.
Look,
personally,
I'm telling you right here and now, if it came down to like eating bugs or eating your dead body, if we're like the Donner Party or something like that, and you died, and I'm going to cook you up. I'm going to have a leg fillet.
I'm also the person who's I don't have an ethical quandary with eating these animals, but I'm also the person that buys maybe a pack of meat in like every 2 weeks or like a month. So I don't eat meat for every meal. I do eat a lot of dairy product, but that's mostly because somebody gave me a bunch, and if I don't eat it, it's gonna go bad.
People are like, run, Puck. Run for your life, Puck. Well, again, we're not talking about survival things, though, right? When you're in survival mode, that's a whole different ball game. But there's a thing. Obviously, I hate spiders. People know I'm not a huge arachnophobic, but I mean, I'm just not a fan of spiders. But I mean, people eat fried tarantula. And I'm like, I love fried food. I'm not going to eat a fried tarantula. I'll take fried lobster any day of the week. But is there really any difference between them as far as like their aesthetics? They're both very ugly creatures.
No, yeah.
Sorry,
one is a crustacean, one is a water crustacean, and one is a land crustacean.
Okay. You know those little pill bugs? Those little pill bugs are crustaceans too. They're I think they're the only land crustacean, if I'm not mistaken.
That's the same
I'm
reason
not gonna
why
eat a bunch
people
of
are
pill
like,
bugs.
oh, cannibalism is wrong. Don't eat people. It's actually not that bad.
Yeah.
The only thing that you have
don't.
to be
By the way, never want to go to a house party at Cheshire's house.
The only reason that you want
Don't eat the hors d'oeuvres.
I'd eat a baby. Don't even start with me. Whatever, man. It's already dead.
Well, I don't see it. I don't see an ethical problem with cannibalism. I honestly don't. But
the only thing that you have to be careful of is that do not eat gray matter of the brain, because if you eat gray matter of the brain, it can potentially cause you problems. So, like, as long as you're not stupid, I don't care if you eat
things obviously have to be cooked right, because prions are a big thing, and you could die from that. But I mean, ethically, I don't really care about eating a dead person, especially to survive. I'm like, you got to do what you got to do.
I mean,
I think we should have a society eating dead people? No, but
I would go a step further. I think if you're alive and you sign off, your body should be allowed to be used for sex, and necrophilia shouldn't be illegal.
Well, okay, let's look at that real quick. Isn't that a philosophical concept of bodily autonomy, of what you decide to do with your own body? But the same token is you cannot sell your own body parts. That's illegal, right?
Yep, and you're also dead. So if you're dead, do you really get a say?
Yeah, at that point,
and
there's something. Well, there's something about, even in most contractual things, after a person's deceased, most things end, right? There are some things that survive death. I'm not saying that they don't, but most of the time, after death, things are no longer considered to be contractual.
Well, what I'm specifically talking about is, why should anyone's will ever be followed? They're dead.
Yeah, and by the way, Smitty makes a very good point. Cooking in itself doesn't necessarily get rid of prions, right? Because they're misfolded proteins, so you got to be careful of that. But that's why there's certain things you don't want to eat. The brain could potentially have a higher degree of prions, from what I understand. But yeah, they're not like they're bacteria that you're killing off, right? They're misfolded proteins. But I don't know what kills. I don't know what actually you would do to get rid of prions. I'm not that familiar.
Now that we've explained that literally everything has some kind of philosophy in it somewhere, let's take a look at this last tweet, because we got way off topic.
Yeah, and I do want to end this pretty real soon. I've got to.
Yeah, we're getting to that 2-hour mark. So, models are governed by philosophy, end quote, because he's quoting what you said. This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. They're built upon general principles like principle of least action and data. You can talk about philosophy of anything, but in reality, it's no more than navel gazing. Can you please tell me what
action is philosophy?
Is?
I read this. The principle of least action is one of the most philosophical concepts of science. This is what I'm saying. He's got to be a contrarian. He cannot for the life of me say something like that without going in his brain having some kind of synapse misfire. I don't understand that at all.
Necrophilia. Watch this get clipped. Do it. Clip it. Put it everywhere. You should be allowed to have sex with my dead body. That should not be illegal. Clip that.
Well, I mean, do you get to say that before or after you die? For example, if you don't have a say,
well, that's a silly question, Steve, because you can't answer it after you die. You can only answer that question before you die.
That's not what I mean. Obviously, I'm saying, should she have it in writing saying that after she dies, people should have that? Or before she passes, if she doesn't say anything on it, should people just be allowed to go have sex with dead bodies? Because I have a problem with that idea. But if she says, "Hey, look,
okay.
I'm dedicating my body to whatever you want it to do it with," well, I mean, is there an ethical consideration there?
The answer, I have a two-pronged answer to that. First off, I should be allowed to dictate whatever I want to happen to my body as long as I'm not causing harm to somebody else. So if I want to donate organs,
so you believe in full bodily autonomy?
What?
You believe in full bodily autonomy?
Well, I believe in the legality of it. I'm talking about legal stuff. Now, once I'm dead, I'm dead. I don't give a shit. Nothing I said about that should matter after the fact unless other people decide that it matters. So if I say I want this to happen to my dead body and people don't follow it, you're not morally obligated to follow whatever I said I wanted to happen before I died. There is no moral ramification there anymore. As far as this is my point of view.
Okay, but I think one could make an argument to duty. If you make a promise to somebody, right, and when you make that promise, you have a statement. This is
that's different.
Speech Act theory.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
So if I made a promise to you that after you die,
you might have a personal moral, like individual obligation that you've decided on, or some promise that you've made external, or so like that'd be an addition or an addendum. So
but if I tell you, if I tell you, you're the person that's dying, and I say, look, I'm making an obligatory action by a deontological fact, because when I state something to make a promise, right? This is it commissive? I think it's commissive. That I'm telling you this is what I'm going to do. And so even though you do die, that duty I don't think stops. I think that when you say, look, I'm going to have your body cremated, you say, hey, promise me, Steve, when I die, you have me cremated.
Yes, if you make some
I think there's a duty there.
Yes, if you make some kind of commitment to somebody, then that's a moral obligation that you've imposed upon yourself. But
exactly. I think a permissive will extend past death.
Yeah, sure, but that's something that you've imposed upon yourself, and that's fine. If you want to, I wouldn't disagree with that. What I'm saying is that if you made no promises to me, and my will said, Steve, have sex with my dead body, you're not obligated to do that. There's no moral obligation.
Yeah, that's good. No, thank you for that's a really good thing.
But on the other hand,
to do that,
there's the other side of that equation. If the other side of that equation says, don't have sex with my dead body, there's nothing morally obligating you to not have sex with my dead body either.
Well, I mean, again, I mean, you're allowed to say what people. If I think people can say what they want to do with after they're dead if they do it beforehand.
I mean, I can say I agree. I can say whatever the hell I want.
If I say, look, I don't want my body to go to science, it would be immoral or unethical to do that after the fact, right? If somebody says, I explicitly have in writing, I don't want my body to go to science, and then they send it to science, I have an ethical issue with that.
Yeah, I don't
think there is?
They're dead.
Okay.
No, fuck them.
Yeah, so I think that we do have an obligation to fulfill people's last wishes. And again, it's philosophy, right? There is no right or wrong answer to this.
Yeah, I think it's noble, and I think it's kind of people to respect the dead, but I don't think there's any actual tangible reason as to why you should care. Right?
I just think it's a societal thing. I think as a society to have a more coherent society that we have certain obligations like that. But again, I'm not big into funerals. I've never been to a funeral. I don't ever want to go to a funeral. I have my own.
I just think it's
that.
Yeah.
As a society, the funeral is not for the dead person, right? The funeral is for the people going. The funeral has nothing to do with the dead person. If you think about it, the funeral is strictly for the people going to the funeral, for them that closure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's silly to say that if my will dictates that Steve has to have sex with my dead body and he doesn't want to. And doesn't do it, that he is not there's no moral obligation that he has to follow my will. Same goes the other way. Both ways.
No offense, Jess. If I don't want to have sex with you while you're alive, what makes the hell you think I want to have sex with you when you're dead? I mean, it doesn't get any better.
I don't know what you're into. That might be the factor.
Nothing personal. But hey.
But if I say, if my will says,
she's using this, Steve must have sex with my dead body. This is my last wishes. Oh my God. This is going to be the weirdest one taken out of context ever.
if you go the other way and say, I don't want you to, you are also not morally obligated to follow what I said if I said don't. You might have your own ethical considerations as to why you might not want to do that, but it's not because I didn't say don't do that.
Yeah, no, like I said, it's a different way of looking at moral obligations, right? Do they survive death,
Yeah.
or do we have I think when you have a commissive with somebody, you make a promise. I think that's a speech act theory that makes something reality. I think that you have a duty at that point to fulfill.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you have a if you say something though, like if you say somebody else must do this, but if you say somebody else must do this, that's not a commissive. You don't have the empowerment. Like the example of when a priest says, I now pronounce you man and wife, or somebody who has the authority to do that, that commissive is a fact that changes reality. They have now, by uttering those words, has made a fundamental change about reality. Now those two people are married, right? So words have actions. Words can create.
Yes.
Well, words can change things by an esoteric force. So they are not actions in themselves. The words aren't actions, but speaking them is an action that changes something.
Yeah,
but you saying that I have to do something is no obligation to me. Yeah.
Right. If you say that you're going to do something, you have put that obligation on yourself. Now, whether or not you follow that obligation could be a personal moral qualm for you. You may think that it's immoral to break that obligation, except for maybe some kind of extenuating circumstance. So if I say, Steve, don't have sex with my dead body, and you say, I promise I'm not going to have sex with your dead body, and then later something happens and it's like, no, I guess I gotta fuck Chesh's dead body.
No, I wouldn't even have to make a promise on that. It's just one of those things that I don't need.
Well, okay, so what if I said, Steve, I need you to promise me that you're going to have sex with my dead body, and I'm like, I have no oxygen, I'm like high on drugs, and I'm just really upset, and you promise me that you're going to have sex with my dead body just to make me feel better before I die. You are not morally obligated to have sex with my dead body just because you try to make me feel better.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with you. No, I agree with you. I'm not. That's under duress, and commissives under duress are not necessarily obligatory. The way I look at it. So. I'm doing. You guys know I'm doing whatever I can to get out of having sex with Jess, no matter what, live or dead. Just not gonna happen.
I'm just fucking with them. So I have a question then. If you're going to say that under duress, then those things don't necessarily apply. How does that apply to marriages that are born within abusive relationships?
Oh, well, yeah, that's a whole different topic, and I think that's a really good topic.
Did you get married while you were in an abusive relationship, and now your morals are like, what, I promised I would do this? Hey, guess what?
Right.
Maybe your vows were made under duress, and you just got a get out of jail free card. You're welcome.
Yeah, no, I think there's a whole topic to be discussed there, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this was interesting. This took some side turns I wasn't expecting. But at least we all know that different people could have different philosophies, right? I mean, there is no one size fits all. That's what I like about philosophy, is that you can talk about these types of topics. So
it's almost like Steve and I don't actually agree on everything.
We're not supposed to. That's the point. This is what's weird. Somebody disagree with Steve. I'm like, yeah, that's who I want to talk to. I no offense. I could talk to people that agree with me all the time. That's not of interest to me. I'd rather talk about people who disagree and find out why, and maybe change my position or me change their position.
Interestingly enough, what we were talking about with animals and food, and the ethical as well as philosophical quandaries with those things, you end up with a situation where biology and chemistry are now both involved in the philosophy of whether or not cannibalism is okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, if there's no harm to anybody, and people say, hey, you can eat me when I'm dead, I don't really care.
Philosophy is in everything. And yeah, I'm sorry, Feline. We got really bored with Dr. Matt Hunt being stupid and being self-contradictory. There's nothing, what else are we supposed to say about it?
Yeah, look, this guy, again, I'm not taking away what he's accomplished. The guy's brilliant in what he does in mathematics and magnetohydrodynamics and stuff like that. But I'm sorry, when you make some really asinine, stupid statements where people that do read a little bit about philosophy, they're going to call you out on it. I think he should be. I think that people should recognize this as somebody who should not be taken seriously as philosophy. Doesn't mean he's going to do science, right? But he's one of those people that doesn't even understand his own work by utilizing the fact that he has to have philosophy.
I think there is a degree that people should not take his work as seriously.
Well, the science is objective. It won't matter.
Sure,
right?
But that doesn't mean you don't. His writing and the analysis and stuff should now be called into question about whether or not his philosophy behind what he's doing is sound. Yeah, whether or not his methods are sound. Are they? How do we know? What are the ethical because there's also a whole other thing about the ethical considerations of making sure that your experiment or whatever you've done, it has integrity, and that whatever you're producing has integrity. That's philosophy. So if this person thinks that their philosophy doesn't matter, then what ethics do they have about falsifying data?
I don't remember their name, but that other person was the same thing. They're like, well, when I do a study, I don't have to worry about philosophy. I'm like, okay, so you don't care if you falsified. Yeah, so you could falsify data. Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that. Well, hello, if you say you don't give a damn about philosophy, you're saying you don't give a shit about falsification of your own data. So you can make shit up. I mean, that's ethics. That's philosophy. So yeah, I think that they do themselves a disservice. But I do like the fact that more and more people are recognizing these things, because those conversations were going on without me. When was this last time I talked to him? It was on Friday, probably. But for the most part, I was away this weekend, so. Didn't get much on.
How many different sciences did we touch just going on those tangents? Economics, history, geology, biology including like
physics,
resource management,
nuclear.
business ethics, social sciences, mathematics. I don't think we touched physics too much. We did in one
quantum
conversation.
Mechanics is physics.
Biomechanics. Oh yeah, no, that's right, biomechanics. Yeah. So yeah, we were talking about quantum stuff when Team was here.
Yeah.
Basically, in this stream we just demonstrated how Dr. Matt Hunt, by going on a tangent, we just demonstrated how that person's full of shit.
Yeah. Well, like I said, a lot of people recognizing it. A lot of people are giving him shit for it and giving grief, and I think that's admirable.
That's kind of why I like having these streams, because I think a lot of people do not know or understand how much philosophy actually has to do with their regular day-to-day life. The economics of gas prices has to do with philosophy.
Well, and well, like I said, he's like, well, mathematicians don't even care about philosophy of math. I'm like, really? Landon, he likes that topic, actually. When we were talking about, yeah, I was like, really? So we don't give a shit about what's called constructivism or finitism or ZFC or any kind of
the education of that mathematics.
Yeah,
education.
Like mathematics is very heavy into philosophy, I assure you.
It's bizarre. All right, let's get out of here. I think we had.
Yeah, let's get out of here. Like I said, I didn't even have to like. It was weird as people were like, oh well, you guys are just sounding like Steve, and I took it as a compliment. But I'm like, I'm not telling these guys what to say. I mean, they're all independent people. I have no contact with most of these people outside of when they come in the live chat. I talked to maybe a few, like Mr.
My favorite is they don't even know who I am. They're like, oh, you sound like Steve, and I'm like, you have no idea who you're talking to.
Yeah, like Macabre I'll talk to every so often because we go way back. But, I mean, I can tell you I've never told him what to freaking say. He's his own entity, his own agent. So these people
if you tried to tell Macabre what to say, he would tell you to fuck off is what would happen, basically.
But most of them are like that. Most people that are on Twitter, they tell people, look, I just happen to agree with Steve on this. One person was like, I disagree with Steve on everything else, but on this I agree with. And yet, it's like all we're doing, all Cheshire and I are doing, is we're giving out information that people may not have been exposed to before. That's all this channel has really ever done, especially this show, Caffeine Corner. It's about talking about things that a lot of people have maybe never heard of before and go, wait, I've been doing that. I didn't know it had a name, or that's a really interesting way of looking at it. Yeah, that's what we do. That's what we enjoy doing.
If anybody takes anything away from this stream, it should be that necrophilia shouldn't be illegal.
That's her argument. That's her argument. I'm not arguing that.
I'm not. Disavow. I disavow it.
Cowards.
Just
Cowards.
Remember, Just remember, the statements on this show from the host may not necessarily reflect that of the channel owner. Okay. You know.
Being thrown under the bus.
Yeah.
Steve, you betrayed me, just like all those haters said you would.
I didn't say I agree or disagree. I'm just not even going to go there. Can we go home now? Can we get out of here?
Yeah, let's get out of here. Bye, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye.
Never mind. Okay, we'll do it next time.
Say it.
Hey, we're back.
Say it.
Oh, we're back.
Came back.
$5.75 for $5. I did not expect my day to somehow end up discussing the morals surrounding necrophilia. God's damn it all to heck. I love this channel, LOL. We came back just for that super chat because that was so good, Helios, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.